Coming up on a newscast. Ballots are being counted for the U.S. midterm election. The results could adversely affect the Biden administration's policy in various fields. North Korea fires a short-range ballistic missile. The provocation was launched just hours after the polls closed in the U.S. midterm elections. President Yoon Suk-yeol begins a 6-day trip to Southeast Asia for the G20 and the ASEAN summits on Friday. The South Korean leader is expected to lay out his own vision to strengthen cooperation with member nations. Hello, it's good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. Ballot counting is underway for the U.S. midterm elections. The outcome will determine which party controls the House of Representatives, the Senate, and most state governorships. It will also set the landscape for the presidential election 2 years from now. Our Bae Eun-ji joins us on the line with the details. Eun-ji, do fill us in.
Daniel, for this year's midterm election, 35 of the 100 U.S. Senate seats and all 435 seats in the House of Representatives are up for grabs, and 36 states were electing governors. As for the Senate, it's a very tight race. As of now, according to the Associated Press, both the Democrats and the Republicans are on course to win 48 seats. They need at least 50 for a majority, so they both need just 3 more seats to reach the 51 needed to take control. In Pennsylvania, Democrat John Fetterman appears to have narrowly beaten Republican Mehmet Oz, flipping a key seat previously held by a Republican. This was the first seat the Democrats picked up in the Senate this time. Meanwhile, the Republicans held on to their seats in Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina. 4 remaining key battlegrounds include Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Nevada. The race in Georgia is heading to a runoff slated for December 6th, as neither candidate has won 50% of the vote. Arizona and Nevada are the biggest question marks, as significant numbers of votes are still to be counted in both states. In Wisconsin, where nearly all the votes have been counted, Republican Ron Johnson is slightly in the lead, but winning by smaller than expected gains. As for the House of Representatives, so far the Republicans are in the lead with more than 190 seats, while the Democrats are on course for at least 170 seats. A party needs at least 218 seats out of a total of 435. The midterm results could have a profound impact on the next 2 years of President Biden's presidency, and so far high inflation and concerns about the economy have been big factors in its low approval ratings.
And Eun-ji, we also hear that a Korean-American congressman has won his 3rd term in New Jersey.
That's right. Democratic Representative Andy Kim was re-elected Tuesday to a 3rd term in New Jersey, becoming the first congressman of Korean descent in 26 years to win a 3rd term in House. Kim was first elected in 2018 and became the first Democratic congressman of Korean descent and the 2nd overall after Republican Jay Kim of California, who served in Congress during the 1990s. Also, Republican Young Kim, a congresswoman born in South Korea, is seeking a 2nd term, and she's likely to win in California. Daniel?
All right, Eun-ji, thank you for those updates. We appreciate it. The U.S. midterm elections come at a tough time amid concerns of recession, roller coaster oil prices, and inflation running at decade highs. The state of economy is also said to be the key in the battle to control Congress. Jung sheds light on how results could impact South Korea.
On top of the pain of rising interest rates, one of the biggest concerns on the minds of voters in the U.S. midterm elections was sky-high prices. Runaway inflation became a major source of criticism aimed at the Democrats, who have been controlling the White House and Congress for the last 2 years.
But now I think, it's the most important because, of course, inflation, the economy, prices are horrendous. I thought I was going to be able to retire this year, and I'm going to have to wait another year. So it's bad.
Polling suggests that the public sees the economy and inflation as their most pressing priorities, outweighing many other concerns from abortion rights to gun violence. This has led to the Republicans using the public anger over inflation by putting high consumer and gas prices at the front of their campaign. But experts say neither of the parties' economic agendas would directly help curb inflation.
Because inflation is a global phenomenon, I don't believe there is a specific measure that either party can use to rein in inflation immediately. Instead, the Fed is continuously pursuing a tight monetary policy by hiking rates so it might help curb inflation.
Weighed down by voter frustration over the economy, Tuesday's midterm election is leading to a shift in control of Congress. But experts say even with the Republican victories, U.S. economic policies that could particularly impact South Korea, including the Inflation Reduction Act, the slimmed-down version of the Build Back Better bill, and the U.S.-led Chip for Alliance, are likely to go into effect without major changes.
There are some claims that the Republican Party could revise or discard the Inflation Reduction Act, but major change is highly unlikely as it has already been signed into law. But as the administration is deciding on the details, South Korea should negotiate with the US ways to reduce the negative impact.
He added both Democrats and Republicans are pursuing the America First stance, so the U.S. is likely to maintain its hard line on China, and there could be more U.S.-centered supply chain reforms. 엄지영, Arirang News.
According to Seoul's military, North Korea launched a short-range ballistic missile Wednesday afternoon. This comes when already an unprecedented number of missiles have been fired by the regime this year. Kim Da-mi has the details.
North Korea's spate of military provocations continues, this time with a short-range ballistic missile into the East Sea. South Korea's Joint Chief of Staff said it detected the launch from the Sukchon area in Pyeongnam-do province at around 3:31 p.m. The missile flew 290 kilometers at an altitude of around 30 kilometers at top speed of Mach 6. Wednesday's provocation is particularly notable in that it came just hours after the polls closed in the midterm congressional elections in the U.S. But an expert points out that what many are worried as the North's imminent nuclear test may be on hold.
The results of the midterm elections may change the situation on the Korean peninsula, so the North may be on the watch for that and are postponing a nuclear test.
Seoul's military on Monday also kicked off its 4-day computer-simulated taeguk drills to beef up operational capabilities against North Korean threats. This is something that the North has slammed the South for, calling it an open provocation. Seoul's military says it's on a full standby while closely cooperating with the U.S. Japan also lodged a complaint with the North through its embassy in Beijing.
North Korea has rapidly escalated its provocations. Such unilateral actions are a threat to the peace and stability of Japan, the region, as well as the international community, and are absolutely unacceptable.
The latest provocation came just 4 days after Pyongyang fired 4 SLBMs into the West Sea over the weekend. In fact, last week, the North unleashed a total of 35 missiles as Seoul and Washington conducted their joint air training drill, Vigilant Storm. And for the first time, one of the missiles fired toward the East Sea landed in international waters south of the North Limit Line. That's the de facto maritime border between the two Koreas. The South Korean authorities sounded air raid sirens on Ulleung-do also for the first time. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Satellite imagery shows the regime is continuing fissile material production at the Yongbyon Nuclear Scientific Research Center. According to 38 North, vehicles and personnel continue to move about the complex. Activity detected at the reactor is at relatively normal levels, including continued water discharge into the Guryong River, indicating the reactor has been operational since July 2021. The U.S.-based North Korea monitoring website also mentioned that new buildings are added. They could be the regime's systematic approach to upgrading key facilities. The missile North Korea fired last week that landed south of the de facto maritime border has been identified. It appears to be at least in part of Soviet design, resembling a type of surface-to-air missile that's been used by Russia in the Ukraine war. Han Sung-woo explains further.
South Korean military authorities have concluded that the missile North Korea fired across the de facto inter-Korean maritime border last Wednesday was an SA-5 surface-to-air missile. The Defense Ministry on Wednesday announced the results of an interagency analysis of the debris salvaged south of the northern limit line on Sunday and condemned the launch as a clear, deliberate provocation that violated the September 19th inter-Korean military agreement signed in 2018.
I believe the missile launch was intended by the North to serve as both a retaliation against the joint military exercises between South Korea and the U.S. and the disposal of an old weapon.
According to the ministry, the debris found is 3 meters long, 2 meters wide, and based on its appearance and features, resembles an SA-5, which can also be used as a surface-to-surface missile. Russia recently used a similar missile in its war against Ukraine. It also includes damaged parts of the missile's 4 main wings, liquid fuel tank, main engine, and nozzle, and has Russian writing on it. The SA-5, developed by the Soviet Union in the 1960s, is powered by a liquid fuel main engine and 4 solid propellant supporting engines that can fly as far as 300 kilometers and reach an altitude as high as 40 kilometers. But officials have said they cannot confirm whether it's Russian-made, which suggests the North may have assembled imported parts of the weapon from the Soviet era. A military researcher told reporters on Wednesday that the missile's accuracy is relatively lower than that of the regime's new short-range ballistic missiles, and that its trajectory is at a range where it can be intercepted by South Korea's military. Based on the missile's trajectory at the time of its launch, the Joint Chiefs of Staff had initially assessed it to be an SRBM. 한성우, Arirang News.
On Friday, President Yoon will begin a trip to Southeast Asia to attend the G20 and ASEAN summits. Some experts believe the South Korean leader's first in-person meeting with his Chinese counterpart could take place. Yoon provides a glimpse of what to expect.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol will embark on a 6-day trip to Southeast Asia for the G20 and the ASEAN multilateral summits. It'll be his 3rd overseas trip as president, where he will lay out his own vision to strengthen cooperation with the ASEAN on top of foreign policy with alliance, freedom, and solidarity as central components.
President Yoon's ASEAN trip is meaningful in that he will put forth his own specialized Indo-Pacific strategy. His Korea-ASEAN solidarity vision will set a historic milestone to push specialized cooperation with the ASEAN based on our Indo-Pacific strategy and principles.
It'll be wheels up on Friday, the 11th, for Phnom Penh, Cambodia, as world leaders gather for the ASEAN summit, and Yoon is set to hold a South Korea-ASEAN summit upon arrival. Then on the 12th, there will be an ASEAN +3 summit involving China and Japan. The next day, the South Korean leader will attend an East Asia summit to address security issues on a regional and global level, particularly as North Korea ratchets up its nuclear and missile threats. President Yoon will then travel to Bali, Indonesia, to attend the G20 summit, taking place on Tuesday the 15th, to address food and energy security as well as global health, during which the South Korean leader will take the podium. During his trip, Yoon will sit down with world leaders from Cambodia, Thailand, and the Philippines and attend a welcome luncheon and dinner hosted by Indonesia. Eyes are on whether there will be separate bilateral and trilateral meetings with U.S. President Joe Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. Yoon is also likely to meet his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping for the first time during the multilateral meetings. Another key pillar of the upcoming trip is the economy, for which President Yoon will speak at the B20 summit involving business people in Indonesia and a Korea-Indonesia Business Roundtable. This as South Korea aims to bolster economic cooperation with the ASEAN, the 5th largest economic bloc in the world, and Korea's 2nd largest trading and investment partner, and a source of abundant key minerals and raw materials.
There are 3 key points for economic diplomacy. First, sales diplomacy. Second, bolstering the supply chain in the high-tech industry. And finally, establishing a digital partnership.
Yoon will return home early on Wednesday to meet visiting Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, and Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, in Seoul next week. Their discussions will focus on cooperation in chips, electric vehicles, and renewable energy. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Prevention is the core of the government's strategy in ensuring crowd safety and public protection from future calamities. Details, including plans to have a tangible mechanism on deck within this year, were discussed at a recent meeting of relevant officials. Lee Siu has the latest.
By the end of the year, South Korea will come up with a comprehensive action plan to prevent tragedies like that which occurred in Itaewon from ever happening again. That's according to the nation's Interior Minister Lee Sang-min speaking at a Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters meeting on Wednesday. As part of the plan, a task force will be formed to, quote, shift the paradigm of national disaster prevention and safety measures. The team will work to improve emergency first response, focus on the prevention of disasters, and take a scientific approach to disaster management. The National Police Agency is also launching a special task force divided into 3 teams. One each for crowd management, situation management and response, and improvement of organizational culture. They will work to improve response systems to large crowds and incorporate artificial intelligence to establish an alert system. There will also be educational opportunities for the police specifically designed to train them to respond quickly in disaster situations. Meanwhile, the police agency's Special Investigations Unit on Wednesday raided a hotel in Itaewon that adjoins the site of the crowd crush for installing illegal building structures that have made the alleyway narrower. The agency is also investigating the head of Yongsan Fire Station, Choi Sung-bum, for allegedly failing to communicate promptly with the police and respond to the situation. The National Fire Agency defended Choi, saying that he responded to the situation in a direct and active manner. As of 6 p.m. on Wednesday, 17 of those injured during the Halloween weekend tragedy are still being treated in hospital. As for the 26 foreign nationals who died, the remains of 20 have been repatriated to their home countries, while 2 have been laid to rest in South Korea. The other 4 will be repatriated to their home countries this week and on. With regard to the families of the remaining 4 foreign national victims, South Korea will continue to provide assistance upon their arrival to Korea. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
South Korea's climate ambassador attending COP27 pledged support in helping developing countries deal with climate change. At the conference, Na Kyung-won said responding to climate change is one of Seoul's key tasks in becoming a global pivotal state. She also mentioned the government plans to help developing countries with green transition by expanding ODA to fund eco-friendly initiatives and related tech. At the conference, Na also highlighted that Seoul will stick to its stated goal set by the previous administration of reducing greenhouse gas emissions to 40% of 2018 levels by the year 2030. Over the next decade, South Korea aims to transition into a hydrogen economy. Plans include having some 30,000 green vehicles powered by the energy source hitting the roads, as well as increasing production, distribution channels, and technological capacities. Lee Kyung-eun zooms in on the goals.
At the heart of the global carbon neutrality trend is intensifying competition to develop hydrogen as the new clean energy. And South Korea Wednesday joined some 40 countries that outline strategies to boost the hydrogen economy, which is gaining more significance in the wake of energy supply disruptions caused by the Ukraine war.
In order to become a leading country in the era of the hydrogen economy, the new government has set the goal of fostering the world's best, and it will push for the policies needed to achieve that.
As the first step for the transition, the government will boost domestic demand for hydrogen, starting with the mobility industry. Right now, there are only around 200 commercialized hydrogen vehicles on the roads in South Korea. And all the current hydrogen charging stations are mostly for compressed gas. But by 2030, the government aims to have 30,000 hydrogen cars in the country and 70 charging stations that store liquid hydrogen, which compared to gas is safer and can be stored in larger quantities. It will also install more energy superstations where traditional gas, electricity, and hydrogen can be recharged at the same spot. And by 2036, hydrogen is expected to take up 7.1% of the nation's energy development. All of this is expected to have an economic effect of some $35 billion, create 100,000 jobs, and reduce 28 million tons of greenhouse emissions by 2030.
For the expected rise in demand, the government will ramp up production using nuclear power, install a large-scale liquid hydrogen plant, and expand distribution channels. It will also scrap regulations and increase subsidies, with the aim of nurturing 600 hydrogen-related farms at home by 2030. 이경은, Arirang News.
Staying here in Indonesia, the number of people employed in October saw its highest on-year increase in over 2 decades. According to Statistics Korea, more than 28.4 million people were working, up 677,000 from 2021. It was mostly driven by workers 60 and older, followed by other age groups except for those in their 40s. By industry, manufacturing led the way. However, growth is slowed for a 5th consecutive month due to inflation and rising interest rates. Officials will monitor external factors, including exchange rates, to see whether it impacts employment. South Korea's largest startup event is now on. Outstanding startups are showcased. It also provides networking opportunities between new ventures, investors, and seasoned entrepreneurs. The first ever private sector-led programs are introduced as well. Itaewon provides a sneak peek of Comeup 2022.
Startups move the world. That's an idea that South Korea is aiming to promote within its business ecosystem. According to the Ministry of SMEs and Startups in August, there are a total of over 34,300 venture and startup companies in South Korea, with 92 newly founded this year. As these startups largely contributed to the rise in employment rate, even during the COVID-19 pandemic, startups are beginning to carry weight in the economy. Comeup 2022, the largest startup event in South Korea, kicked off on Wednesday, both to showcase outstanding startups and to interact with global startup ecosystems. And what's special about this year's event? It's the first time it's being run by the private sector.
Easing restriction is important when it comes to developing startups. Measures that are implemented in businesses come from the time of industrialization. But now we are in the phase of the 4th industrial revolution, so I think we should ease restrictions that harm growth.
The event is made up of around 70 booths and includes South Korea's leading startup companies, with some anticipating more attention because of the event.
We develop AR displays that can be implemented in glasses. It's been 6 years since we founded the company, so we are expecting more people to know about our business, as manufacturing startups like us have low exposure compared to those in other fields.
Global industry insiders will be sharing their experiences and insights, while 10 unicorn companies, which are valued at over $1 billion, also participate in pitch decks where they'll present their business plans. For even more collaboration with startups, large-sized companies like Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor will present their business models and projects to these venture companies. Comeup 2022 is being held for 3 days, introducing a variety of programs to boost startup. By providing a network between new ventures and experienced entrepreneurs, South Korea aims to further promote the development of the startup ecosystem. Itaewon, Arirang News.
Milder conditions are in store for tomorrow, with readings higher than the seasonal norms. But most regions will see morning temperatures remaining in single figures. This will create wider temperature gaps between day and night, while Seoul will see a gap of 10 degrees. Places like Changsu and Uiseong will see a bigger difference of more than 15 degrees, so make sure to dress in layers. Despite the rise in temperatures, air is not circulating so well. This is leading to an accumulation of more fine dust particles. For the Seoul metropolitan area, Chungcheongdo and Jeollabuk-do provinces, air quality will stand in the bad category. For the surrounding regions, dust concentrations will temporarily remain high for the morning hours. Jeju Island will see brief showers tomorrow. Morning lows in Seoul will be starting off at 9 degrees. Daily highs in Seoul will be reaching 19, Daejeon 20, Gyeongju and Busan will be reaching 22 degrees. This weekend, nationwide showers are expected. On Sunday, much colder temperatures are in the forecast. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all from us. As always, thank you for watching.
A global network representing Korea.